I think we are good.
Good. All right. Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's talk. I've entitled it Opposites Attract, Bizarro World, and the idea of writing a to-don't list rather than a to-do list, which I want to do. Now, Bizarro World, for those of you who are not familiar with Bizarro World, it was a 1958 DC Comics concept, which was around the Superman theme, and Bizarro Superman was evil. He was the anti-hero, if you like. Seinfeld used it in his in the 158th episode of Seinfeld, 168th rather, and it was around the idea of doing the opposites and everything being back to front. In Bizarro World, Superman, up is down and down is up and in is out and out is in and good is bad and bad is good. And it goes on and on and on. And Bizarro World, Superman speaks as me not Superman and me Bizarro and all this sort of thing. And it's quite an interesting concept. But the reason I decided it would be a good one to talk about tonight is particularly for the people who are struggling with being a little bit too hard on themselves. And I think, you know, from an evolutionary perspective, we are designed to look for the easy way out, to avoid pain, to keep ourselves safe. Now, when I hear people talk about that, and, you know, often you've heard me quote Charles Darwin in his 6th edition of The Origin of Species, where he says it's not the strongest, nor the fittest, nor the most intelligent, which is most likely to survive, but the ones most able to adapt to change. Now, obviously, we are ancestral of those who ran fastest, were strongest, and adapted to change. Now, within that adaptation, there would have been a development for a lack of fear. And as much as fear is designed to keep us safe, and I've said this before as well, when we are born with only 2 fears, the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. If you're present at the when the obstetrician came and checked on your children as they were born or shortly after they were born, he would have grabbed them by their hands with them in his hand, and he would have had a little bit of it, and he dropped them and they would have gone like that. And he would have been checking their reflex, and that's their falling reflex, and would mean that their nervous system and everything was in place and everything was tickety-boo. He would then check their hearing and then the eyes and everything to see whether or not, or see that they could hear. You'll notice in smoke detectors, they are programmed to obviously make a lot of noise because most of our senses shut down while we're sleeping, particularly the sense of smell, which is why you wouldn't smell smoke in a fire sense, if you like, and why they, yes, that's why the noise is there. But as I say, we don't have the saber-toothed tigers. There's not the scarcity that there was around. And a lot of the ways in which we look after ourselves these days, just talking to Zach about the carnivore diet. We base the idea of how to lose weight on eating as naturally as we possibly can. But from an evolutionary perspective, the reason why I think that, yes, we might have been programmed however many thousand years ago, 40,000, 50,000, 60,000 years ago, around the idea of survival and staying safe, is all of those dangers, and most of them aren't there anymore. Most of the fears that we have is false evidence appearing real. And as Seneca says, we suffer more in imagination than we do in reality. So what I was going to posit this evening is that if within the course of your voyage or your turnaround, if you like, things aren't working for you, then I suggest you might look at another episode of Seinfeld where George just did the opposite. Everything that he said no to, he started saying yes to, and everything he said yes to, he started saying no to, and he took a different approach in the way that he viewed the world. Now, for me, whenever I think, well, I'm getting a bit stuck with a situation here, what am I doing that's not working? And what could I do differently? And differently, I have found for myself, has been the complete opposite. I had lunch with my youngest daughter today. She's just returned from a European trip, and she's finding it difficult to get back into the swing of things. It's like you would have heard the honeymoon is over, and everybody loves planning a wedding, and then they get married, and then they look over and there it is, bugger lugs, and you and me are stuck together for the rest of our lives, ideally. But as I was listening to my daughter's story today, and she said, "Oh, you know, the people ripped us off here, and the visa happened here, and they didn't take us here, and the flight was booked, and they only paid for this." And I said, "It's an interesting thing. I often say to people, the most fun you have around a holiday is the planning of it. People don't plan for lost luggage, for missed flights, and things like that. And I guess it is with life that we don't plan for the bad things to happen. For mine, I say do take them into account. There is a Latin expression, premeditatio malorum, which is pretty much the premeditation of evils that may lie ahead. And so when I say to people, what is the worst thing that could possibly go wrong in this situation? And if you've identified what that is, then do everything in your power to make sure that it doesn't happen. And when I say there's a Japanese expression or a theory called the Kaizen theory, that if that doesn't work, try something else. And if that doesn't work, try something else. And if that doesn't work, and I have asked the room to say, try something else. And that's what I would suggest you do. So from the perspective of trying something else, if things aren't going the way you'd like them to go, then how about trying to do the complete opposite? So when I say to write a to-don't list, my to-do list is, okay, I've got to do this, and I've got to do that, and I've got to do this, and I've got to do that. And if I'm not doing it, what is it that I am doing instead that I could to don't or don't do? One of the first things that I think about from our biggest enemy is our mind. And whilst it should be on our side, we own our mind. And so we should be the boss of our mind. We should be the one who tells our mind how it's going to be. And so when I say, one of the first don'ts that I would say to anybody to write at the top of your to-don't list is don't doubt yourself. Pinch yourself for sure, but don't doubt yourself. The idea that you have committed to a plan and you've committed to a course of action and you'd like to try it on, then don't doubt yourself. Have every faith and every confidence in yourself that you will be able to do what it is you have said you will do. So from a doubt perspective, doubt is that thing where, you know, he who hesitates is lost. Before you take on a course of action, see it through to the end and have a complete understanding that you're actually going to get there. Now, I read something from my partner works for a company called We Are 8, which is a social media app that it's all about the greater good. We are 8 billion people on the planet. The idea of this social media app is that you're only on it for 2 minutes a day. The founder, an Australian, has actually put a lot of her own money into this app, and you know it's quite unique in the fact that it's a hate-free zone. It's based on a model that you do watch the advertising and you watch 2 minutes of the advertising, and you spend about 8 minutes a day rather on the app. But for each time you watch an advertisement, you get paid. And then that money that you get paid goes into a wallet. Now that wallet you can cash in or you can donate it to a charity. And within the course of setting up the app, you then write down who those charities are that you'd like to give that money to. Now, they're paying not a lot of money for this. You might get paid 5 cents to watch an ad. You could watch, 5 cents, blah, blah, blah. Now, if you get up to $1, your dollar giving to whoever is only whatever, but with the millions, 1 million people giving $1 is $1 million that you're giving to charity. And the whole point of We Are 8. Now, the reason I say that and bringing this, the founder, Sue Fennessy is her name, and she had talked about all of the successful companies that she has launched and what she'd done. And within the last minute or two of the podcast that I listened to, the interview that she was in, she gave away the secret to life, I believe, in a lot of cases. Even the book, The Secret, which people read and go, oh, wow, that's great. I'm going to write out my big wishes and put them out to the universe, and they're all going to come true. And this is great. And Brian Tracy, who's one of my favorite self-help gurus, said, and he wasn't invited in to the secret and the filming of that with all of the self-help gurus, if you've seen it, read it, or heard of it. So he might have been a little bit disgruntled, but there's one thing that he said that was left out of that book. And it's the one thing that when Sue Fennessy had said in her final minutes of the interview, and I wrote to her in a comment afterwards saying, you just gave everyone the secret to success, which is feeling. And that is feeling the feeling. So when I set goals, they say thoughts are things. And when you set your goals, you put them out to the universe, and that's your thoughts going out. But your feelings is what brings them back in, is what brings the achievement of those goals to their fruition. Now, obviously, God helps those who help themselves, and you have to do something. It's not just wishes. And when I talk about manifesting things, manifestation requires you to actually do and say and believe. Napoleon Hill said, whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. And so when you write down those goals, you don't doubt yourself. You don't doubt that what it is you've asked for or you set as a goal will be achieved. Even in the Bible, Jesus says, when you pray as though you already have the thing it is that you're praying for. Now, with that in mind, you have to feel what that's like. Now, this founder of We Are Eight has said that has imagined herself already ringing the bell when they go on an IPO, when they sell the company. And really, you can launch whatever product you like. And it's not until you sell that product, that company. And I encourage businessmen, when you write a business plan, you have a 7-year plan. And in the 7th year, the idea of it is selling that business. All the way along, you're thinking of your next business as you go along. But you should never launch a business with the idea that this is going to be the thing that you retire on. You're either going to sell the business or have that left to your children. Back to the point I'm making around don't doubt yourself. When you can actually feel what it feels like to be, to do, be, and have anything it is that you want to do, be, and have, it's that absolute feeling that makes it real. Now, when I say don't doubt yourself, I mean that from the perspective of within the course of change, you have to change a lot of the belief systems that you've had and a lot of the way in which you viewed the world. I don't know that society has changed all that much since I was a child in relation to how people heckle and put people down. And as much as we're not necessarily taught how to love people at school, they don't go, right, this is how you treat a girl and this is how you look after your partner. But they certainly teach us through our colleagues and our peers how to criticize others and in turn be self-critical. So my suggestion here is that when I was a kid and even as an adult, people go, all this self-help business, because they're just too cool for school. They're just too cool to believe that, my suggestion that thoughts are things and putting it out and bringing it back in a magnetizing perspective is a little bit too ooga booga. Now, the reality of it is, this isn't, you can call it whatever you like, but I don't give a damn. For me, I just say, hey, if what I do works, then it works. I've set these goals and I've achieved what I've achieved, and I encourage people to do what they do. And when they do it, they get what they say they wanted to get. Zach and I were talking, and I hope he doesn't think I'm talking out of school here, but he had said, hey, I've gone back on to that suggestion that you'd said, which was to avoid wheat, dairy, and sugar. And it's really made a big difference. And he's almost, doing the carnivore diet, which I love. Now, only the question that arose in my mind was, why did you stop? And it's like any of us. Why did we stop? When did we decide that feeling as fabulous as we feel just had run its race and we didn't want to feel that? Don't go to bed. Alarm I set for myself. So, as I say, it takes just as much discipline to go to bed early as it does to get up early. But I'll talk about that later on as well. So don't doubt yourself when you're setting any of your goals or expectations, or even the life that you visualize, whether it's an improved relationship with your children, whether it's an improved relationship with your partner, whether it's an improved relationship with your colleagues, whether it's an improved relationship with yourself. Do not doubt the success of that goal or that chosen lifestyle change to come into fruition. There's your first one. When I say do the opposite, again, in the conversation I had with my daughter today, and I said, I'm going to use that tonight if you don't mind. We had lunch down here at Hugo's in Manly. It was lovely. And she was talking about what she had done prior to the lunch. Because I said, what are you going to have? And she goes, whatever I like. I said, good. So you've trained today? And she said, yes. And she said she wasn't going to. She was sitting on the lounge and she was thinking, righto, I could binge watch whatever this latest series of Netflix is. It was raining here in Sydney today. And it was the perfect day for that sort of thing, to do bugger all. But as she was sitting there, she said, well, hang on, I could do that. And then I've got to go to lunch and I can't have dessert and I can't have an entree and, you know, can't do this. And she's probably not going to be as fired up. So she said, so I just did the complete opposite. And I got up and I went to the gym. And she said, but then when I got to the gym, I thought I will just walk and I'll just listen to this thing and I'll just have a bit of a stroll and I'll watch the thing on YouTube. And she said, but then I thought, what's the opposite of walking? I'm going to run. And I said, oh, so you missed out on your thing? And she goes, no, I'll watch it. I just, watched it. It was a bit bouncy as she was going. Now, I hadn't said to her that I was actually going to have this conversation tonight, but I thought it was interesting that she had done the opposite to what she was going to do. And that's what made her more beneficial. So when I say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If your systems of goal setting and your self-discipline isn't working, then try something else. And even if that means do the opposite. So the first don't I say to anybody of a daytime is don't snooze. Don't hit the snooze button. Now, here's the trick on that to start with. If you go into your phones and I go, right, I'm going to set an alarm. So what I'm going to do there, I've set the alarm. Now take that off. Get rid of the snooze option. There is no snooze option. So you've eliminated a choice. And when I say, we're the options generation, we're the choices generation, we're not, we're the preferences generation. You prefer to hit that snooze button rather than get up. Marcus Aurelius says in his book Meditations, when I arise of the morning, I think to myself, what was I born to be? Look at the animals. The animals actually don't stay in bed. They don't stay in the nest and go, oh, it's a cold one out there today. Or they don't stay in the cave or wherever they're from. They get up and they just do what they do. We as creatures have a really curious way of living the life that we live. Now, I place more importance on sleep than I do most things these days. And I write in my goals that I'm belligerently defensive of that time to sleep. And I'm belligerently exclusive of certain periods of time throughout the course of the day. What I mean by that is that belligerence is a real, some people may or may not be aware of the word, but it's a very much belligerent people are always looking for a fight. They're always, yeah. So I will always fight and defend my time to sleep. I had a whole series of late night events last week, which I had to honor. I was a guest at a couple of them. One of them was a last minute invite to a Bucks party to a very good friend of mine. It's a bit of a secret eloping style wedding. So I'm going and I went to the Bucks party. And there's a bit of a don't that I'll throw in later on. In fact, no, I'll throw it in now because just in case I forget it, because I didn't write it down. One of the best don'ts, I think, from a Bucks party perspective. So for whatever reason, there's a thought, oh, I'm going to a Bucks party, so all bets are off. What happens at the Bucks party stays on the Bucks party. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas and all that BS. I don't see why, and I have noticed this, that some very intelligent people get on a Bucks party and then just become fools and act completely out of character. Now, the way I get home, I get out of things quickly, and it's the price I pay. And given that I value time more than anything, if I want to get out of a restaurant, I pay for the lunch. I'll pay for the dinner. There was an impromptu lunch on Monday of this week, I think it was. One of my brothers is a policeman. He's doing a boxing fight, charity boxing fight, and he showed me a video of it. And I said, bro, who's teaching you the boxing? And so we had a 10 o'clock boxing session here last Monday. And then after the hour, and I said, what do you got on for the rest of the day? And he said, oh, you're going to Mary's lunch, which is my sister. And I said, no, I wasn't invited. And he said, oh, they probably didn't invite you because it's all the way out of Harris Park, which is probably an hour and 20 minutes away from me. And I looked at my calendar and I said, you know what? I could actually do that. If mum's going to be there and a couple of my other siblings are going to be there, I'll go. And I hadn't seen my sister Mary for a while. Anyway, so jumped in the shower, went out there. When I got there, I forgot the fact the reason why I don't go to too many of my impromptu family things is they just take forever to order. There's no rule, you know, oh, yep. Anyway, and I'd been sitting there for 45 minutes and still hadn't even placed an order. And I had really only put an hour aside to get there. With all the travel, I would have had 3 hours. And my plan was to listen to a podcast, which I did on the way out, and then talk to some people on the way back. And so I quickly ordered some goat. It was an Indian restaurant. I got the goat, and I had the goat. And then I went up to the bloke and I said, hey, listen, I'm going to pay the bill. What is it? I paid the bill. And it was pretty reasonable. And then I bailed. And I do what I call a Bermuda bathroom, which is generally I'll say, I'm just going to the bathroom, and then I leave. And I've always found when I pay for the bill, no one really cares that you left. They go, oh, man, thanks. What's your bank account details? Oh, you shouldn't have. Thank you very much. I don't tell people I'm going to pick up the bill, because when you tell people you're picking up the bill, they order things like lobster and things they'll never have on their own ticket. So it's always a nice way to do it at the end. But the thing I say about bucks parties is don't go to the strip club. I mean, bucks parties don't start in strip clubs. They start in a pub, and they might start in a restaurant, or they start at wherever, at a footy match. And I've been on bucks parties that have started at the races and things like that, but they end up at the strip club. Now, how I get out of going to the strip club is I always say, and no one ever argues with me, I say, hey, they like cash. They love cash. I'm just going to go and get a bunch of cash out, okay? I'll see you guys there. And, oh, yeah, great. Dave's going to bring the cash. And I jump in a cab and I go home. Now, the 2 things that does, my partner was quite surprised that I was home as early as I was, because it was a bucks party. And I said, hey, I've got to get up early tomorrow morning. So that's why I'm up the time I'm up. Now, no one really cared. Everyone the next day, the feedback, oh, it was fantastic. It was great. No one said, what do you think of the bucks party or the strippers or anything like that? Now, one, you keep yourself out of the brothels and out of the strip clubs and out of those places that are ill repute, if you like. You keep your self-respect. You keep the respect you have for your partner, and you also have the respect for. I always found whenever I went to, it's probably the nature of the job that I do, whenever I was pulled into a strip club or dancing girls or whatever it is, I'd be the one saying to them, why are you doing this? Like, oh, I'm studying and all that sort of thing. And, that's just the sort of thing that I do. But plan there is don't doubt yourself, stick to your plans, and don't doubt that you will be successful. Because the moment, Peter Pan said, the moment you doubt you can fly, you cease forever to be able to do so. The moment you doubt yourself, no matter how grand your plans are, they're gone. That's it. Next thing I'd say is don't sweat the small stuff. The trivia, the minutiae, the things which matter most must never be at the mercy of the things which matter most, Goethe said. And sometimes we worry about the silly stuff. My father said, do the simple things well, and everything else will take care of itself. And I think if you have a plan and you're doing the simple things well, and little by little, a little becomes a lot, then you're going to get there. It's one day at a time, one day at a time, one day at a time. Don't sweat the small stuff. Just don't let the trivia bother you. If it does, take a deep breath, let it out, and off you go. Don't accept a fixed mindset. So when you're sitting there, Mark Twain said, it's not what you don't know that's going to get you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. And quite often, I remember I'd been giving a talk for years about, vitamin C. A lemon's got has got 132% of your daily vitamin C intake. So when you have a lemon juice in the morning, that's great. You're set for the day. Eggs have every vitamin in them except for vitamin C. Now, when I was, reading a Brian Tracy book, and he's a bit of a guru, and I like him, and I listen to his stuff as well. And he had said, don't accept everything you're told as fact. And when somebody says something you're not 100% sure of, ask them, how do you know that to be so? Now, I'm less inclined to say to somebody, how do you know that to be so? I might say, oh, where'd you hear that from? And they'll tell me. And if the source is, questionable, or if I've never heard it and I really doubt it, I will go and look it up myself just to make sure. But I remember thinking, hang on, when I read this, I've been talking about the benefits of eggs for years, and I've been talking about the fact that an egg has every vitamin in it except for vitamin C, and that's probably why they serve eggs with orange juice in diners and restaurants. Now, I got that from when I was about 8 years of age, went to the Royal Easter Show, and there was a bunch of chickens in cages and roosters and all that sort of thing. And on the prize chickens cage, it said that eggs have every vitamin in them except for vitamin C. And that was 1974. Was the research sound? It is true. I've Googled it since, and it is true. Eggs have every vitamin in them except for vitamin C. So when I say don't accept a fixed mindset, I mean, if all you know today is all you know today, then that's all you'll know tomorrow. Fixing your mindset around a certain way of thinking and being very rigid in there is the complete opposite of a growth mindset. And if you don't have a growth mindset, then you're just never going to grow. You're going to stay where you are with your stubbornness, and you'll be right. And there's some people I know who I've said, you know what? You're going to wake up one day very, very bright and very, very lonely in this house or a big house, all on your own. But you weren't wrong. And that, to me, when I said earlier on that there was a stage in my life where I'd say to people, nah, that's rubbish. And I would argue with them, and they'd be making a point, and I would say, no, that's not true. And I'd get in an argument with the person because I had to know more than that person. Now, don't argue is the next on the list. If you're getting into arguments all the time, there is that saying, if you meet a jerk in the morning, you met a jerk. You meet jerks all day long, then maybe you're the jerk. And the jerks you're arguing with, don't argue and don't raise the level of your voice. Raise the level of your argument in as much as don't argue. You don't have to. I often say to people, ask questions. Asking questions is a better way to have a conversation that gets somewhere than an argument, because arguments just get around and around and you're back to this where you started from. You don't think you're wrong, they don't think they're wrong, and you stay in a stalemate. So don't argue. My next don't is don't be negative. It's so easy to be negative. It is one of the easiest things in the world is to expect bad things to happen. I guess in my line of work, I meet so many people that I think it's very interesting that they say, I can tell you who you'll be in the next 5 years by the books you read and the people you hang around. And I was in talking to my daughter, and I was sitting there, and obviously I hadn't seen her for, a few months, and she looks fantastic, and she's got the colors of a European summer. And I was really, really proud for her and excited and happy. And my entire focus was I'd turn my phone off, just going to be there. And then what happened? And then what happened? And then what happened? And I really wanted her to have a great, conversation because she did all the talking. But I did say to her, wow, it's unlike you to be so cynical. You seem quite negative. What's going on? Then I realized it's the people she's been hanging around since she got back. She's gone to hanging around all the people who didn't go to Europe. So when she went, she went with a whole bunch of her friends, and the photos were fantastic. And all the people she was hanging around are the people who didn't go to Europe. So they've all been bitching and moaning about places and what was wrong with it and things like that. And so don't complain. There's something I say to people: if you set yourself a 21-day challenge of not complaining, and every time you catch yourself, and tell everybody, I generally say to people, don't tell people what you're doing, show them what they've done, what you've done. And I also say, don't tell people your goals. Excuse me, there is one goal that I suggest you do share with people, and that is that you're not going to complain for 21 days. Because they'll pick you up on that. That's a complaint. And the second you complain, you go back to day one. Now, you've only got to do this a few times before you go, hey, you know what? Look at how much I'm complaining. I'm complaining about how much I complain. So don't complain is one of those things that, I met an old bloke one day and I said, how you doing? I knew him, but I bumped into him. I said, how you doing? And he said, I can't complain, but apart from that, I'm not too bad. And I think you will find there are some older people that I know. And again, I think there are two different types of people, and these are the ones that I want to be like. I used to go to saunas when I first moved down to Sydney, and I'd go to the RSLs, and the old blokes who were sprightly and were in there limbering up and stretching and doing all this. And they would talk about the work that they'd just done, the holiday they had planned, the the guard, what they were going to do for the rest of the day, the golf. And that was brilliant. I thought, wow, these are really positive men. And then there'd be the fat, sweaty, hungover, sweating out the old bitching and moaning, complaining people that I thought, I don't want to be like them. And they just complained a lot. And I think complaining is also wrapped up and very closely associated with blame. You generally complain. I mean, you're complaining about the weather, that crowded house song, everywhere you go, always take the weather with you. I have had picnics planned where it's been bucketing down with rain, and we've had the picnic in the back of the car with the boot up when it would work, or taking it under cover. There's always a way that you can actually do something better than just complain. My next one was don't be negative. Now, if the opposite of, if you say, I want to have a positive mindset, I want to be a positive mental attitude. One of the first books I ever read that changed my life was The Power of Positive Thinking. I had come from a negative outlook on life. They say to the man who only has a hammer, everything is a nail. If you have a negative mindset, then everything's negative. Some people make a hell of heaven and a heaven of hell. If you think something's going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong because you're looking for things to go wrong. And when my line of work, I meet a lot of people and I sit there, or because of the way in which I prime myself to have a positive mindset, I'm not necessarily looking for it, but I hear a lot of negativity. Even the way that I read for an hour, it's not just I'll read between 10 and 11. I set a timer, and the timer is, excuse me, I'll go boom, and I'll hit the timer for 1 hour. And then if something interrupts me or something happens, I hit pause, and then I hit resume again. So I get a full hour of reading. But while I am reading, I've noticed that early in the morning, people are walking and they're talking about positive things, it seems. That's why I encourage people to be morning people, as in MORN, rather than morning people, which is mourning the mornings that you didn't take advantage of. And I said something recently, excuse me, in 20 years from now, you'll be 20 years smarter than what you are today. And you are naturally 20 years, you're smarter than you were 20 years ago. So if there is something that you have learned that you think it's beneficial, don't wait the 20 years that may not even be in your envelope. As far as your guaranteed numbers on earth are concerned, do it now, begin it now. So the idea of when I hear people in the morning, the earlier people are very positive and they're laughing. And then if I'm reading at about 10 o'clock, I actually hear them grumbling and groaning and complaining and talking. And then she did this and then he said that and, all that sort of business. When women discuss their husbands, when women talk to me about their husbands, or I hear them talking about their husbands, there's just a bit of an aside, they'll always say, and then I asked him and he goes, no, I did that last night. I did it last, and they speak as though their husband's a bit of a moron. And I had a new client and she said something about her husband and she was a little bit of a complaint. And to pick her up on it, I said, oh, and I bet you he says, oh, you never do this. And she goes, do you know my husband? I said, no, all women describe their husbands like that. And she said, oh. I said, what? She said, my husband has cochlear implants. And I thought, oh no, husband was born deaf. But he sounds like every other man that most women complain about when they are complaining. So don't be negative and write that down as a goal. So what I'd suggest you guys do is write these things down, and there'll be more on this later. I've already talked about fear, but don't let your mind be consumed by fear. I watch for things and I expect things are going to happen, and they very rarely let me down. And I caught up with some really good friends yesterday. We had a bit of a party. When I say a bit of a party, I had done a big training session so that I don't feel guilty. And so in order for me don't feeling guilty, when I write that down as a list, it's okay, what do I need to do in order to not feel guilty? And so knowing that I was about to eat to my heart's content for most of yesterday, I fasted for 24 hours and I did a walk that was around about 10 kilometers and most of it uphill with a 10 kilo dumbbell in my hand. So I'm doing a farmer's carry, and every time that wrist or it just got to the point where it was so numb, I'd change hands, and I'd walk and I'd change hands. And I did that. And it's actually quite a good exercise because today I can feel it all in here and all in here from the muscles that it worked. It's an upright, it's called a farmer's carry, 1 or 2. I've done it with 2 before, but this one was a 1. And the point of it was to earn that lunch. Now that was an 1,800 calorie burn. And, I listened to some podcasts and I got a bit of sun and it was brilliant. And I really, really enjoyed that. And that's why I was able to do and eat whatever I liked yesterday. And today, I always do a bit of a post-mortem, and I had to stop each person and say, hey, we hadn't caught up for quite some time. The plan was to enjoy ourselves. You now being consumed or overthinking about the fun that you had. And they go, haven't you, one of the people said, but don't you have this little voice in your head that's just going, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have eaten this. Did we have to have those marshmallows? Because there was kids involved and I'd lit a big fire and, everything was, wow, dang, you're magic. And I find with children, if there's always a surprise coming, they don't care they don't know what it is. You want children to do things rather than saying to them, hey, you did that and you can play on Nintendo for 2 hours. Okay, we're going to flood your brain with dopamine. I've seen kids whose watches go flat, these little iPhone watches or whatever, they go flat. And, they're going just to hit it because they have been programmed for that dopamine hit. We are doing so much wrong to our children. So when I talk about evolution and the choices and the preferences, we are feeding our children with vices that were never around in our day. Our dopamine hits came from going outside, from chasing, cicadas or each other running around and doing, there were our dopamine hits. That's where we were getting this reward. We're now babysitting children with phones and creating for them this absolute, we think our generation struggled through COVID. There's a lot of things that COVID brought that you also have to say, don't hang on to those crutches. Classic example. I have during COVID, I bought a Wilson volleyball, if anyone's seen The Castaway with Tom Hanks. And I had bought this Wilson thing. I was living on my own and I thought funny. It was quite funny that I had this Wilson as my only friend on this lockdown of survival that we had. And we're sitting there last night and, the fire's on and the kids having their marshmallows and all that sort of thing. And someone bought my Wilson ball down. I don't know where they found it. But next thing you know, bouncing and it's gone into the ocean. And I've just run straight in and jumped in. And everyone's going, well, it's only, and I thought, wow, I got really attached to Wilson, like Tom Hanks in a respect. And I thought, wow, I've formed an attachment that I don't actually like to do because something had a hold over me to the point that I had actually gone, oh, wow, I've responded or reacted rather than respond. And in retrospect, it was dark. There's rocks there. I didn't know the depth. And that could have ended badly in thinking about it. But I've only just, I thought about that now, but it wasn't something I beat myself up on today. And I quite often find that rather than people having a good time and thinking, wow, what was the greatest things? And that's what I was saying to these guys today. What about we say what we really enjoyed about yesterday rather than what we didn't enjoy about yesterday? That's what people think. When you think of what you don't have, when you think of the bad things, you forget about the good things. When you think about the good things, you forget about the bad things. My next don't is don't listen to the naysayers. That's an Arnold Schwarzenegger. In Arnold Schwarzenegger's 6 Rules for Success, he says, don't listen to the naysayers. Now, I do listen to the naysayers because every single thing I've ever achieved in life has come about as a result of people telling me that I couldn't do them. Couldn't, shouldn't, or can't, all that sort of business. Like, yeah, you reckon? Silently, I'll prove you wrong. And then, Seinfeld says the best revenge is living well. I have the life that I live these days by doing everything I was told I would never be able to do. Now, your soul won't pay the mortgage, all that sort of thing. Don't listen to the naysayers. You know who they are. They're in your ear. They're trying to tell you that you can't do the things that you, one, shouldn't be doubting yourself that you can do, but it's going to be a lot easier for you to do what you say you will do and be who you say you want to be and have what you say you want to have. If you don't doubt yourself, don't listen to Mr. Mini-Me, the biggest naysayer, and don't listen to the naysayers, the ones who generally want to keep you small. because if you get big, then they've got to get bigger. Don't dwell on the past is the next things. Lao Tzu said, anxiety is living in the future, depression is living in the past, and peace is living in the now. Nostalgia is planning for the future with optimism, absolute optimism. Nostalgia is looking at the past, I say, with a really fond way of looking at it. Look at what you want to remember in life. Don't dwell on the past. If you can't deal with it, don't dwell on it. I say to people, if you're not going to deal with it, don't dwell on it. If you're dwelling on it, then you're actually just creating mental stress for yourself that is just not worth it. So don't dwell on the past in a negative perspective. Feel free to be nostalgic and look at the good things. And as I say, plan optimistically for the future. Optimism is the panacea. There is no way in the world you will achieve any of the things that you set out for yourself to achieve without the optimistic belief that you will. The naysayers will call that toxic optimism. They'll call themselves realists rather than what they really are, which is pessimists. But pessimist is one of those words they don't want to hear about because it's a reality. And as long as they're being a realist, then, you're an optimist, a toxic optimist. Don't neglect your body. The idea that your body is the only place you have to live in, as Jim Rohn says. Gandhi said, be kind to your body. It's the one thing that ensures your mind awakens every day. But in neglecting your body, you are neglecting the vehicle for your mind and the one thing that's going to carry you to the finishing line. The idea that I say to people, there's 3 doors, muscularity you, morbidity you, or mortality you. And I believe that at the age that we're born, the generation we live in, and understanding the age of the men that listen or tune into these talks, they will live to 85 if they look after themselves at the very least. So the idea that, are you doing weight-bearing exercises? Are you picking heavy things up and putting them down again? That's building muscle mass. The reason why muscle mass is considered one of the 3 determinants of longevity or a long life is the fact that it's actually connected to your skeleton. So your muscles are your exoskeleton, like Arnold Schwarzenegger from the Terminator, and your skeleton is your skeleton. And it is the strength of your muscles that determines the strength of your bones, the ligaments and the tendons, and also, of course, the neurons that are within there, which is your nervous system. Can't fire a bicep up if you haven't got the nerves in place. So don't neglect your body. Don't neglect what you know you have to do. When you set these things out, they are your to-do list, but also look at your to-don't list. I'll give you an exercise to do after this. Of course, don't smoke. Don't smoke is one of the biggest. You smoke and everyone will outlive you. 40%, you have a 40% higher incidence of death over everybody else because you smoke. It's a fool's errand. We all may or may not have been there, but it's just, there is no way in the world. Now, again, don't smoke or don't vape. And I see people and I just think, wow, like vaping in restaurants, and yes, it tastes like Oreo biscuits or whatever, but it's the addiction that you have because of the dopamine release that is a false profit. It's not really giving you what you really, really want. I often say to people as well, look at a life insurance policy. Apply for life insurance or apply for income protection insurance, and see the questions that they ask you. If you answer no to any of the questions that they ask you, do you and you shouldn't, then don't do that. If you ask yes, answer yes to the things if you answer yes to the things they say, do you smoke, for example, and you say yes, don't smoke. If they say, do you have high cholesterol? Get your cholesterol down. High blood pressure? Get your blood pressure down. All of these, of course, are affected by muscle mass. Cholesterol comes down. Blood pressure comes down if you're using your muscles. Now, no one's talking, you don't have to look like Arnold. You just have to do something to the point where it's an exertion 10 to 12 times or something, and one strength-based workout a week where you are pushing your muscles and you really do feel that they're being used to the point that it's at least 30 minutes, 150 minutes of cardiovascular walking and 150 minutes of weights. What's that? 30 minutes a day, an hour a day. So half an hour one for 5 days a week. Not a big ask from the investment. When I say, if you measure your body, if they put biomarkers on you during the course of exercise, your inflammation's through the roof, your blood pressure's through the roof, your heart rate's through the roof, you're the closest to death you're ever likely to be while you're actually exercising. But the recovery is where all the good stuff happens, where you are breaking down and getting rid of all the toxins and rubbish that's in your body. The next one I actually say is don't obsess over your body. There is a thing called body dysmorphia, where we either think we're thinner than what we are, fatter than what we are, and all that sort of business. And a lot of new clients to me think I'm bullshitting them when I say to them, hey, you're not as fat as you imagine. You really do think you're a lot worse than what you are. And there's this one woman who I've been working with, and she's so hard on herself. And again, they're names and things that other people have said to them, but they believe them. And they believe them because the people who say these things to them are supposedly close to them. They're a sibling or a lover or a partner, and you would expect that they have your best interest at heart, but they don't. They're mean things that they say. Anyway, this woman keeps talking about this midriff that she has. Yesterday, I've asked her to do some burpees, and I said, hey, listen, you're not as fat as you imagine, and I'll tell you why. Because if this was such an unlosable thing, you'd have fat deposits on your lower back, and you don't. So be kind to yourself. So don't be too hard on yourself, but don't obsess over your body as well. Because the reality of it is, unless we do this for a living, like I'm not an athlete, I'm not training for competition. And so we see people walking around and go, wow, look at that guy. He's like an Adonis. But he's probably got a job that's what he has to do. I mean, I've chosen all the things I do in life because if you love what you do, then you never work a day in your life. And I read that when I was very, very early. And so me starting a boot camp, as I say, the woman I trained yesterday, I got more money off her for half an hour than I did to take a boot camp with 20 people in it, because I'm not doing it for the money. Oscar Wilde said, some people know the price of everything and the value of nothing. The value exchange for me is the fact that I'm motivating 20 people and I'm seeing them come in, and some of them smell like booze and some of them have had a tough time and some of them are a little bit whatever. And by the end, they're all, hey, Dave, thanks, great, this was fantastic. And they want to sit around and have a chat. That's great. But the idea is, don't obsess over your body too much. That's pretty much it. Don't be so busy that you miss the magic. Now, by that, I mean, things like smelling the roses and the magic of the little moments. When I said earlier on that Johann von Goethe said the things which matter most must never be at the mercy of the things which matter least. If today was the last day of your life, would you spend it the way you spent it? When you're, talking to your child and you're going, yep, that's it, right? Or get out of the way of the television, that sort of thing. If that was the last time you saw your child, would you be happy with the exchange that you had? Now, it's a pretty morbid thought at first, but as I said to you guys before, all of my micro habits were at one stage macro habits. Excuse me, the first time I considered the idea that it might be the last time I ever hugged my daughter, they were young, they were prior to being 5 years of age. But that mindset, after a while, just becomes one of gratitude and appreciation rather than fear and morbidity and, they're still breathing and all that sort of stuff. You just have a little bit of a different, it becomes a micro habit of care and appreciation. I've told you that one, don't believe everything you've been told, particularly about yourself and particularly by the people who tell you. There is a thing called Mitfreud and Schadenfreude. So Schadenfreude is where someone is actually genuinely unhappy for the fact that you're happy. You tell them good news and you can see that they're unhappy for you. And then there are people who are genuinely happy for you when you tell them good news. And they're the people that I love catching up with because I think, wow, they really, and it's very easy when I say to Cull, don't listen to the naysayers. You can't listen to them if you can't hear them. Don't give them airspace. Don't give them your valuable time. Oxygen thieves, as I call them, they're just not worth your time. They don't deserve your time either. Don't be stingy with your time or your money. When I say my highest priority is time, and I place more value on time than I do on anything, I've got my little Bruce Lee clock here and he roundhouses around the clock. Bruce Lee said, if you love life, you'll love time, because time is what life is made up of. And if I'm constantly focused on time, then I'm very, very aware of its value. and I don't waste a moment of it. Seneca said, the man who puts the finishing touches on each day is never short of time. So when that go to bed alarm usually goes off, that gives me 15 minutes to make sure I've got everything set up for the morning. But it also makes me think, did I give a good account of myself today? Did I squeeze every little drop out of this day? If this was the last day of my life, would I be happy for the way that I spent it? And quite often I think, wow, I got through so much today. It's not until I stop and think about it that I do. Even on a day like today, which was a rainy day in Sydney, and I thought there was a lot of things I had planned that I wasn't going to do. And I thought, no, actually, I wanted to pick this watch up. I had to get the band fixed, and it was in the city, and I got a ferry across the city. And as a result, bumped into some people, and I had a really great day. And, you know, I went around the rocks, and I hadn't been in the rocks before for a while. That was good. So when I say don't be stingy either, sitting down to lunch, and I said to my daughter, what do you want to have? And she goes, I'm going to have the tasting platter. And my first thought was, wow, $6.50 an oyster. It's just, you know, and then I thought, it's only money. It's only the $6. I'm the sort of person who will, I'll go, righto, let's have lunch. We'll meet at my place first, and then we'll go and walk in for lunch. And people do. Now, when they meet at my place first, we have oysters, because I can buy a dozen oysters from the fish markets, and I'm paying, what, maybe $3 an oyster? I don't know, but I'm certainly not paying $6.50. And so when my daughter said oysters, I thought, my first thing was, oh, you know it. And I said, okay, great, that's wonderful, that's lovely. Expensive taste, I've raised it well. But she hadn't had oysters for a while, and I know that she always posts her little Instagram shots when she catches up with me, because she, well, I shouldn't say little, because, you know, they're important to her. But I know she gets the oysters out there because she catches. And so to me, I thought, don't be stingy. And with my time. And so I literally locked out up until at least 6 o'clock today, because I had tonight's talk to prepare for, and I need it from at least 6 o'clock. Now, preparation for me also entails self-care, and I have my sauna and cold and all that, cold therapy and all that sort of thing. As much as I say, don't be stingy, don't be wasteful. So don't be wasteful of the things that you have either. When we have these, I subscribe to things, and I encourage people to subscribe to them on a monthly basis rather than a yearly basis. And the reason why I say that is that people go, right, oh, I might get a subscription to, I don't know, some app, an app that might be $100 for a year or $15 a month. And so you go, I'm going to get the $100 a year. And then you're not aware of that. But if you recognize the need for the app, or the use or the purpose of that app in your life, then subscribe to it monthly, because that monthly bill is going to come up and you go, oh, I wasn't really using that. Yesterday, for example, I did my MyZone, but I also have a subscription to Map My Fitness. Excuse me. And so I put it on so that I could listen to my podcast, and it could tell me. I had not necessarily known how many kilometers this particular walk that I was going to do, because I was not going the full distance. And that's why I thought I'll be curious to see how long this goes. And Map My Run or Map My Fitness says 1 kilometer, 11-minute splits, blah, 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 blah. So not to be wasteful of that, as well as when I say, if you're, like even that thing when Zach and I were talking about dieting, every diet, no matter what it is, works from the elimination of processed foods. So I never feel that I'm wasting processed foods. If there's something in a package, it's already been laid to waste. So I don't mind throwing that out. But if I have bought fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, not only is it a good way to use them because you bought them, but you don't let them go off. So I shop daily and every couple of days to make sure I'm getting the value from that particular thing. Don't be absent. Again, when I talk about these things, don't be absent. Don't actually be where you are. When Eckhart Tolle says stress is man's inability to be present, I say that the human body can go 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, 3 minutes without oxygen, but the now is measured as 3 seconds. And you being absent from the now for even those 3 seconds, it's just a disconnect, whether it's from disconnect from these things, disconnect from the mobile phones and all that sort of business, but don't disconnect from the people that you're at or where you said you'd be. The expression that says, wherever you are, wherever you go, there you are. Wherever you go, go there and be there. You know, however you arrive is however you are accepted. However you host is however you are received. So do that. B, don't be absent. Don't lose sight of what it is that you're actually there. Don't be too serious. The idea that this is the Superman top and it's Bizarro World Superman and all that sort of business. Excuse me. I think that sometimes we can take ourselves too seriously. When I say don't obsess over your body, don't obsess over the diet. The reason why I go the fasting route and all that sort of business is so that I can eat, I don't know how many marshmallows I had last night. But the point of that was have some chocolates, don't be too obsessive, don't be too serious. Don't focus on lack. When I say if you focus on what you lack, what you have disappears. When you focus on what you have, what you lack disappears. Now, when I talk about morning routines and evening routines, if we're going to talk about Bizarro World, then Bizarro World is the opposite. The opposite of your morning routine should be your evening routine. The opposite of your evening routine should be your morning routine. So morning routine, the cold showers, nighttime, hot showers, early rising, early to bed. That's about the only two things they have in common. But your evening rituals, and again, they'll be very, very difficult to put into place when you first embark upon them. But little by little, little becomes a lot. And trust the process. My Destiny acronym, which is D, do it now. E, with energy and enthusiasm. S is success is imminent if you trust the process. The T, I is it's inevitable that you will get what you want if you never ever quit. And the Y is you've got this. So the idea of success being imminent if you never ever quit and the inevitability of these habits forming, what they say, the idea that the neurons that fire together wire together. The way you think is the way you become. Thoughts become things. Actions speak louder than words. You can win through action rather than argument. The truth is rarely heard, but only seen. All of these things don't mean a hill of beans, as Stephen Covey says, if you don't put them in place. But there is one caveat. The last thing I have here is one caveat on all of this. And that is that the mind doesn't process negatives. So when I say write a to don't list, whatever you say I don't want to do, that's what you'll do. So when I'm a big believer in affirmations. So rather than say I don't smoke, you say I am a non-smoker. So I would suggest you get a bunch of these cards and you write, for example, I'm going to write I have 10% body fat. Right? Now that's going to become one of my reads of a day. I run whatever. I do. I earn. I wear. I am. And you have to take ownership of it. So rather than say, there's your to-don't list and your to-do list, but here's what I want you to do. This is the exercise. On 3 bits of paper. Now you can do it on butcher's paper if you've got butcher's paper, but you get 3 A4 pieces of paper. And what you will do, I don't know that I necessarily need to demonstrate it. I will. So here's your 3 bits of paper. So you might stick them on the wall behind you and you go, right, 1, 2, 3. On this is what you don't want. On that, here is what you do want. So you're right here. There's my goal. So it might be I want to get up at 4 o'clock every morning. I want to get up at whatever. I want to do this, one of that. You write that down there. Now, that is what you don't want to happen. If you don't do that, this is going to happen. Now, over here on the 3rd one, that's how you'll feel. So, probably a bit of an awkward sort of explanation. But the thing of it is, right, there's your goals. That's what I want. I want to have a morning routine. I want to drink 30 mils of water for every kilo of body weight. I want to lift 4 days a week and move 4 days a week. That's what I want. On the right, what it'll feel like. What it'll feel like getting out of bed every day at that hour. What it'll feel like having the cold shower. What it'll feel like having 10% body fat. What it'll feel like, I don't have 10% body fat, by the way. It's one of my goals by my 55th birthday, which is in a couple of months. So the point of it is, if I write down what I want, and then when I look at it, now this is what happens. You come along and you go, that's what I want. Now you stop looking at what you want and you start looking at how you'll feel. Because if as soon as you look there, you don't want to, I want to feel like a loser. I'm going to feel old. I'm going to feel fat. I'm going to feel tired. I'm going to feel poor. What you don't want, you put there. What you do want, you put there. The feeling of, there's your goals. Easier said than done, but doing the hardest part is the start. So if you pretty much do that, write your goals out, have it visible. When I talk about Pavlov, your goals have to be Pavlovian, portable, actionable, visible, learnable, optimistic. You have to believe that they're going to happen, and verifiable. Tick, 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 tick. With that, gentlemen, have a wonderful evening. Always enjoy putting stuff together, thinking of you guys with that in mind. As I say, the brain doesn't process negatives, so don't say what you don't want. There's your last don't for the night. Say what you do want and focus on that. But if you just start with the first thing of a series of I ams, I earn, I do, I feel, taking ownership of that, that's going to put you in good stead. I am going to bed, and I wish you all a good night. Thank you, gentlemen. Until next time.